welcome everybody to the Successful Survivors today. We are excited to be here. It's because we got here. Sometimes we just have to be excited about the little things that may seem so little, but are actually really, really big success for us with some of the days that we have. I don't know about anybody else, but what I'm talking about is self-care because the motto I say is life is tough, but so are you, because life is tough. And sometimes it's those little things, getting into technology, making time, balancing life, figuring out work, family, responsibilities, all that junk that maybe we think, oh, I should be able to manage this and go, go, go. Where is the stop? Where's the ability to take a break and take care of ourselves so that we can then continue the awesome things all of us across this board do, and that's taking care of others, helping people become the awesome people they were created to be. So today we get to talk about a few basics of what is self-care, how did self-care start in our lives, what do we want to have implemented into our lives for self-care. I see Dawn laughing, so that's a self-care to me. Whatever she's laughing about, I hope she shares because humor is beautiful. Dawn, go for it.
We just drowned. It was awesome. Sorry. I just fell out of my chair.
So sometimes just staying in your chair and getting yourself back up literally and figuratively is a part of self-care, right, Lee? I think you could relate to this.
Uh-huh.
For all the listeners in our crew that's thinking about this is all life right here. And that's the cool thing about successful survivors is we live life and we are resilient through it. And we have to be able to give ourselves, I call it grace, but also some laughter in our maybe failures. Failures is a great thing because we learn from them. And the fact that she laughed and supported each other and then took a deep breath and didn't say, hey, let me talk right now because I have to. That is a part of self-care. It doesn't have to be complicated check mark box stuff for self-care. It's probably not going to happen. Self-care is taking care of yourself in so many ways, physically, emotionally, socially, spiritually, mental or psychology in that aspect, in so many different ways. So it depends on how you learned it as a child too, and how those around you represented self-care or mimic self-care. Chris, you got a grin on your face, so I'm going to start with you. Tell me about your thoughts right now, and maybe I'm going to curve this a minute, how you grew up thinking about what self-care would be. He's froze in excitement. I love this. That's what that is. And you know what? Self-care sometimes, Rhonda, is just taking a break from a screen too. And as much as we're going to laugh about this, I'm also going to tell all those of you who are viewing, maybe today as Chris comes back in is a great way to role model. Have you exited yourself from meetings or screens or technology? That is self-care right there. So I am going to say that there. But now, Chris, that you're back, welcome. What was self-care for you growing up? What was that like?
I just went for a run because Lee fell out of her chair and it was too much for me. And so I had to break away and take care of myself. And so I went for a quick run. And now, if anybody who knows me knows that I don't run. There's only 3 reasons to run, people: police, dogs, and police dogs. That's it. Anyway, so when I was younger, I'd just go to the basketball court and I'd park myself there and I'd shoot for hours and hours and hours and hours. And that was about the bulk of it. And newspapers, I'd read a lot of newspapers, like to immerse myself in that. But yeah, everybody's gotta have a little getaway, and mine was the basketball court. I was comfortable there. I liked the people there. And if Lee falls out of her chair again, I'm sorry, but it's gonna have to be a much longer run because I did not want to laugh at my friend to her face, like you other insensitive people.
So I actually love what you said, though, in that, because you said you went and you played basketball and you did something that I don't know that it's labeled by America's view now as self-care, but especially for kids and teenagers and us as adults, doing something just active that you enjoy doing, being around the people you enjoy being around is really, really important. And at that time, doing that sport and moving, great activity rather than the running, which I don't know was as effective for you. You moved through basketball. So that's great. Dawn, how about you? What did you learn regarding self-care growing up?
Yeah, I learned that there isn't any. I didn't do self-care very well growing up. So, and it wasn't modeled very well for me. I guess, I mean, we always stayed outside. We were always moving. So I guess that could be self-care, but I didn't, yeah. So I guess being outside probably was that. And also we had dogs. So I always just played with the dogs and got poison ivy one time because I hugged the dog and the dog had wanted to poison ivy. So half my face I was Scarface for like 2 weeks. It was kind of fun. Kind of not.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting you say that because one of the cool things I like people to notice about self-care as we are adults is that a lot of times it has something to do with how we learn to do it as a kid. Because if we did what we loved when we were a kid, such as being around animals or movement and activities with others, like you were talking about with basketball, then a lot of times what we love doing will mimic that as a child now that we're adults. And it'll help us identify what do I need to do to take care of myself. So self-care is kind of a hard word because I think it can be very literal, but it's so versatile and it can be so many different things. So I love you saying that. The other thing that you said was getting outside, just getting outside. I'm in Kansas. It's dark. It's gloomy, Nebraska, Lee, and you need vitamin D from sun. Just getting out in the sun can be very, very important. So, Rhonda, how about you?
Oh gosh. Well, I think the question was self-care when I was a kid. So for me, I would go to the library and I would check out the maximum number of books that they would let me check out. And I would hang out in the library until they closed, and because I didn't want to go home because home was scarier than the worst dark alley. And so, but I had my books, and so I would read, and so that was really an escape for me, and it still is now. So to your point, it's my go-to stuff when I was a kid. Some of it is still very, very important to me now. So, but something else that I wanted to add when you talked about self-care being kind of broad or whatever, I automatically thought of, I think a lot of people think about, well, take a hot bath or, breathing or praying and all that stuff is good. But I automatically went to boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, a huge coping strategy is trying to have healthy boundaries, trying to not say yes to everything and everyone, because oh my word, I mean, I now have more than 8,000 people in my contacts in my phone. If every single one of the people I know wanted even one little favor, it's 8,000 favors, right? So, I mean, it just can be overwhelming. And I hate saying no, especially when somebody's in need. So for me, a real self-care strategy that makes a huge impact in my life so that I just don't, collapse of exhaustion or overwhelm or whatever is boundaries.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and claim 5,000 of those favors. And I'm also going to point out that Rhonda definitely watched the Cat Williams interview over the last month. I only read 30 books a day at the library, boo boo. It's what I did every day growing up. That's probably why you wrote 75 books, Rhonda.
It's funny that you say that because they say that readers very often become authors. So yeah, it's my preferred method of communication, not phone calls. Everybody who knows me knows it's not phone calls.
No, I look forward to my weekly book that she writes for me.
Okay.
I also think we should point out Chris's humor here. Sometimes we may perceive it as dry humor or very obvious humor. I enjoy particularly both of those. That is a wonderful self-care. That when it's done in a healthy and appropriate manner as an adult, especially, he gets to go take it into a different field. But I just want to mention, even as kids, and I didn't know Chris as a kid, but I suspect he had some really good humor. It might have come across as sassy or sarcasm, but humor is a great self-care because it brings some joy to not only the physical body, but the mental well-being. So
Enough of that
anything about
witchery.
that, Chris?
Enough of the witchery, social worker. You leave your diagnoses to yourself, please. I know what's wrong with me, thank you.
Oh, Well, Rhonda, I love what you said on boundaries. He was just setting a boundary for me. I appreciate that. One of the things I love also is we didn't realize it when we were kids, but one of the things that I'd say I did when I was younger for self care that I never would have labeled as self care was saying no. I was a pretty strong willed kid, and I did a lot of things for maybe attention that wasn't healthy, but I was pretty confident when I wanted to say no that I said no. And taking that into adulthood is a really hard skill that I have to practice. But I remember that I did some of that as a child of learning to say no. And sometimes as an adult, I have to reiterate to myself, it's okay to say no when it's really not in my interest or something I have time for or something I want to really take responsibility for. That in itself is something I talk about a lot with self care, is learning to say no, which is boundaries. So, Miss Lee, coming to you, before we step into the adult and recommendations, we want to hear, like, what did you learn about self-care growing up, or your thoughts, context of self-care?
Well, I was taught self-care was selfish. So you didn't do self-care. Um, that was rude and unacceptable. So I didn't really learn self-care. I'm in the process of learning it now. I think something I would want to share with those who are listening is that um, there are probably things in your world that you did that may have been seen as a quirk or, you know, uh, just different from your peers. And that might have been a coping mechanism for you for that. That might have been how you handled self-care. Um, and so I just want to encourage those who are maybe struggling the same way that I have always struggled. I mean, even as a full grown adult, almost, 60 years old now, um, I still struggle with feeling that it's okay to do self care, and I want to encourage those who maybe are struggling with that right now, feeling like it is if you put yourself first, even for a minute, then somebody else is not getting taken care of, or somebody's need is not being met. And so I just I just want people that might be listening um, to know that they are not put here to save everyone. And sometimes the best thing you can do is take a step back and look at what do you need, and how can you advocate for that. Sometimes self-care is just advocating for yourself. And as a kid, I probably did it all wrong because I was the first one to raise my hand, not because I knew the answer, but I just liked hearing my name called, right? I was much like Chris, sports was definitely my go-to. Um, and um, and I lived on a farm, so I spent a lot of time out with the farm animals, and petting our cats, and um, I had names for all of them, even though we weren't supposed to name them because we weren't supposed to fall in love with them. So um, that's kind of a weird answer, maybe, to your question, but uh, I just think it's just such a journey, isn't it? Isn't it really just such a journey to know where you're at, what's the new discovery, right? It seems like there's something new being discovered all the time when we're talking about victims of trauma, or people coming from hard places. Um, it's fascinating to me that the journey never ends. And so being gentle with yourself allows you to continue to explore that journey instead of feeling like, oh, there's one more area I messed up in. There's one more thing I don't do like my peers do. Being gentle with yourself is incredibly important on this journey.
Yeah, I love that. And that is so important, of giving yourself grace when it comes to self-care. And that when we are talking about something that is for ourselves, understanding that that's individualized. What you may love for self-care might be different than what I love for self-care. That's okay. And accepting that, and also knowing what you just said of, we're not going to be able to do it all right now. Maybe we have, I particularly have seasons where I'm really good at self-care, and other, or boundaries, as Rhonda would say, and other seasons that I am pulling my hair out most days, and I need somebody to say, hello, did you put that in your schedule? Some time where you can breathe. So giving ourselves that grace as we learn and go through the ups and downs of that in our lives, I think is really important. So let's transition to the second part of this, where we were talking about kind of how we learned it as kids, what experiences we had. So now let's look at recommendations that you would have for people, challenges maybe, or how you apply it in your life as an adult when we talk about self-care. So for me, when I look at self-care, I also talk about it as self-stewardshipness. And I'd say that if I'm going to take care of others, and it's part of my journey to be a steward to others, that I have to be a steward to myself. And then the other thing, in a research, I know Chris is excited about this, research side of it, 70% of people learn through role modeling, especially in trauma. What we experience is through role modeling. They're usually visual learners. They're going to learn from the people around them. So all of us here care for others. We do some type of work for other people. So they are learning through how we behave. And if we take care of ourselves, and we respect ourselves, and we respect our limits, we are teaching something to the people we are working with. There's a lot of power in doing that and teaching that to the people around us. Even if they don't get a lick out of what we say, they get a lot of how we behave. And that is why self-care is so important. When I worked in child welfare, that's actually why I left child welfare, because I would work 60 hours a week and I wasn't taking care of my family and spending time with my family. And I felt, man, I'm saying this to all these other people, but I'm not doing it well for myself. Because I was a giver growing up, Lee. I was like you. I was to be compliant and give and give and give. And I realized I'm not giving them the most important thing, and that's the lesson of self-care. So maybe it's sports, maybe it's animals, maybe it's quiet time. I use a mirror. I have a mirror right here that I give a lot of clients, and I tell them to look at that each night, because that's the last person and the first person you see each day. Have you taken care of that one? So I do that with clients a lot. So for your self-care as an adult, what do you use? What tips do you have? What challenges? Chris, I can't wait to hear your answer. So you get to go first.
You really want vodka? No, I kid. I joke. No. It turns out 87% of the people who listen to what I say are proven wrong later. So I don't know how
Well,
that
you
measures.
are equipping them with great challenging thoughts, problem-solving skills,
Jeez
high
Louise.
intellect.
I'm going to go with what other people do, because I'm not a great resource for self-care. Uh, I tend to keep myself busy to avoid confronting the need for self-care. But what I find that other people like to do, I find they have hobbies. They like to deal with plants. I have some plants, not cutting it. I have some hobbies, not cutting it. Uh, sports, not cutting it. It depends on your level of what you're dealing with. I think um, back in the day, a movie would fix it, and that would be all I need. 2 hours laughing, I'm good. I'm at a different stage of my life, so I'm thinking probably, like, I don't know, like a Mercedes might help. Uh,
I
all debt
suspect
cleared note from some rich philanthropist that might do it. But at this point, I haven't found the right thing yet. When I find it, I will keep it a secret. That's not what I find. If it's something that would work for other people, I'm sure I'd share the news about it. But yeah, at the present, I am not a good resource for this. I have not found, in the words of you two, what I'm looking for as far as self care goes. So, but you are all stable, level headed people. You talk.
Oh, Chris, I love actually the vulnerability of what you just said, that it's a
Stop
challenge.
complimenting me.
I know. And then deflecting compliments and realizing it's hard to take a compliment. These are all things that we can do in the seasons of learning to take care of ourselves. Because, shoot, would you laugh at me if I was offended by taking your joke or if I was saying I was struggling? I don't think, Chris, that you would. You have a good heart in that and you have compassion for others. And so the same thing for yourself and giving yourself that same grace. And the listeners that are hearing this and saying, I'm not at a season in my life where I feel like I'm able to take care of myself. Listeners, if you're in a crisis and you're not able to find a house, have a vehicle, keep somebody safe, keep your mental well-being safe, you're probably not at a point where you're going to be able to be listening to this self-care lesson and be like, I can apply that. It's going to be challenging. You have to process through the crisis to get to the opportunity of putting self-care in your life. And that's an okay place to be. And I love how Chris put reality to that because we have to be real about it. It's hard. Dawn, how about you?
I have some things. I'm so excited. Okay. So, you know me, I'm always looking at the beginning things. And so I looked up how to define self-care because, I'm a self-care geek and I like to learn that stuff. So one of the things, I said a few different things, but one that I pulled out, a couple things I pulled out was gaining control of and overcoming, right? So if I have anxiety and I stop and I decide to go, okay, I know to breathe, catch up on my breathing, make sure I'm not holding my breath, I am overcoming anxiety with that. So I thought that was a really good definition for that. And then also what I wanted to point out too was doing self-care helps you to be your authentic self, right? So if we're not physically taking care of ourselves and mentally, but emotionally and spiritually there are a couple of things that are not being attended to. So if it's all being attended to, I got a little thing I wrote about that. All these things help you to be your authentic self. We cannot be our true self if one of these are affected and left unattended. We have to be compassionate, which we already been saying, right, Amber? Towards ourselves first before we can for others. We are worth it. Even if you don't believe that, call somebody or listen to this because we're telling you you're worth it. Right, Chris? You're worth it. To find that self-care that's going to help you through with whatever you're doing or whatever you need. But have them believe for you for a minute, right? Like we can do that for you. We can be your people to do that. Listen to our podcast. We are doing this for you, care about you because you are worth it. And so I say that because it's taken me a little bit to understand that too, Lee. I hope I'm not offending you by saying that. Because I know that I do have that sometimes where I don't feel like I'm worth it, but we are. And so that's where the compassion comes in that Amber's been mentioning and you mentioned. Chris, you're going to find it. So we got it. So the other thing that kind of got downloaded to me this morning was physical self-care helps you to be motivated and energized, right? If you're drinking water, you're eating, you're exercising, you're getting enough sleep. I struggle with that one. And then also paying attention to your body, how it's reacting. And also, like she said, the crisis thing, one of the crisis things for me is being safe. I have to know physically that I'm safe because I can't focus on anything else. And then emotional gives you the perspective, right? If we're all emotional, like I just had this week, I had an emotional week. My emotionalness is gone. I'm able to think clearly, but when we're emotional and we don't stop and go, why are we being emotional? Why are we being angry? Why are we crying? Why are we depressed? Whatever, then our perspective is going to go through that lens. And then mental helps us to center, right? We are finding relaxing activities, setting goals and priorities, setting boundaries, focusing on positivity and staying connected. So being isolated from people, that is not going to help your mental stability and not your emotional stability. Also, and then spiritual doesn't necessarily have to be God. If you're not a God follower, a Jesus follower, you can go out in nature. You can, I don't know, nature is probably my biggest one I think of is God and nature. And so that speaks to the core of who you are, right? Where you really get in touch with yourself. Those are things that I thought of. The last thing I wanted to say on that, well, two more things. So being self-aware, right? I can't know that I'm anxious unless I stop and go, why am I crying? Why am I feeling all fidgety? Until I stop and go, yep, I'm anxious. Why am I anxious? And then do something to stop. I did the crisis, right? I stopped the crisis by breathing, and then I'm able to take care of it. And then also replace it with healthy, right? If you're doing something for your emotional state that's not healthy, and fill it with something healthy. Right? I'll let somebody else give an example because I don't have one right at this moment. And also something that I've been doing in my own life, and sometimes I'm good at it, sometimes I'm not, is practicing it daily, whether I'm in a crisis or not. Like I've been trying to practice breathing every day, even if it's just for a couple minutes, so that when anxiety happens, I'm able to just pull that out because I've been doing it. So I already know how to do something to help me with that.
Yes, thank you. I love those. There's so many in that. If you rewind and play again, that you could write down and just choose like one or two that gives you a minute or two in your life of self-care. I think that's important to remember, that you just have to choose one or two and implement one or two little, and it can make a really, really big difference. So um, all right. So I think Lee, we'll do you next. And Rhonda, if we can finish with you, that would be awesome. I'm going to reiterate one thing when we talk about this question of, as an adult, how do you practice self-care? Remember that self-care is a conscious act. It's something we do intentionally. By definition, it's a conscious act. So this is maybe a minute of your day. It might be 30 minutes of your day, whatever you can fit in, but something that is a conscious act for your own well-being. So Lee, I'm excited, as you've gone through your growth path and you've been talking to people about this. What do you integrate as self-care?
So, just recently, I did an essay for a local gym that was giving away, through the essay, an opportunity for personal coaching, both on the physical fitness side, but also on the nutrition side. And a year ago, I would not have been able to have done the essay to have entered the contest because, as Dawn was talking to, and as Chris has also expressed, that feeling of you're worth it, you're worthy, is so elusive. It's like trying to hold water in your hand, and so um, part of the journey is the growth, of just like, I want to be the best possible advocate I can be for kids who are entering foster care and how they experience those first hours. And so I need to remove distractions from what I want to share and what I want people to walk away remembering. And so, as a person who carries too much weight, that is a distraction to the message I want people to hear. And so it started with that. And it's moved into, I'm also doing it because I want to be the best possible version of myself that I can be. And because that's when I'm going to be my best at advocacy. And so I'm very, very fortunate that I have a team full of people that I work with, that they want the message to be loud and clear and heard all over in regards to being active in changing how those first hours of foster care are experienced, in meeting the needs of the kids that, um, those physical needs as they're coming into care. And so I have a ton of support in my work environment. My kids are now all teenagers, and so they get probably way better than I do. Even they get the importance of being able to take care of yourself. And of course, I have my husband who fully supports this journey. So I guess, going back to what I said earlier, it is a journey. You're not going to get it right within the first week, right? And perfection is the killer of progress. If all you're wanting to do is do things perfectly, you can't progress through that. You will constantly be feeling like a failure. And so I am just trying to put one foot in front of the other as I go through this journey, and trying to become a better advocate for our kiddos, but also just a better boss to the people I get the privilege to work alongside, a better friend to, our Successful Survivors podcast crew. And so it's just being willing. A lot of times it's just being willing to do the growth.
Thank you. I love how you say that. It's a mind shift for even self wellness and self care. So there was a lot of nuggets she said in that I think amongst the emotion attachment that she can give and the support she can give for listeners, she also had some great little tips and cues in there, taking care of physical well-being, having great support systems, learning from younger people, coming to a significant other that would support you, being in a profession that you love that won't exert you too much. I heard all these tips from you in what you were saying there in that supportive manner. So some great tips and tricks to self-care and knowing your worth and being able to see it and taking care of yourself. So Miss Rhonda, if you could finish us off, that would be great. And letting us know your final thoughts and tips regarding self-care as adults.
All right. Well, thank you. And I want to thank every single one of you. I loved everything that everybody said. And Chris, I'm noodling on what you shared because, and before I get into my thing here, I think when you said, Chris, you made a reference about, I'm not the best one for this. I know people who, know this stuff. Okay, but you know what to do. And I think a lot of us, when we're in that place where we need self-care the very most, that's when we have to go, okay, well, I mean, even if we're saying, I really don't think it's going to work. I really don't think it's for me. But what I've heard is exercise, breathe, pray, relax, whatever it is that you've heard, just do it, try it at least, and keep trying things until you find the thing that works. For me, I think the overarching strategy for self-care, for coping, for overall well-being, for fighting depression, you name it, let me see how much I can pile onto that list, is living our purpose. I really believe that when we begin to search for our purpose, walk toward our purpose, do things that are part of our purpose, and you find it, you learn what that is as you go. As we're doing those things, we feel better. As we're doing those things, it's easier to set boundaries. It's easier to say no to the things that we know don't move us toward our purpose. Maybe they move us away from our purpose. It's easier to identify what those things are and say no to those things. It's easier then to move more than you sit still because you want to move, because you're excited to move. Like I'm not going to the gym. I'm not going to exercise for the sake of exercising. But if somebody says, hey, come do this, we're going to help these kids who are homeless and they're the most vulnerable people for trafficking. I'll do it and wind up walking 5 miles without even thinking about it, without any effort. If I was going to just put on my tennies and go for a walk and have no purpose to it whatsoever, to me, that would just be like torture. And so I know that when you're living your purpose, you just you're happier, you laugh more, you have, you attract your people to you. So then you're with your tribe and life is just better. And you laugh more, and there are more things to laugh about. And you do advocate for yourself, the things that we've talked about. So, that's my thing. I think, I hope that everybody who sees this will not just dismiss this out of hand, but say, okay, you know what? I want to try to find my purpose. And the first thing that you can do to try to find your purpose is to begin to think about, what do you love to do? Do what you love. Engage your creativity. Even if you're not a person of faith, I'm going to tell you, I'm a Christian, and God says in the Bible that He created us in His image. So I don't think that means, 2 eyes and nose and a mouth. I think that means He's a creator. He planted creativity inside of us. And so each of us has creativity, our own, thing, our own way that it comes out. But when you give your creativity some kind of an outlet, I'm telling you, if you do it, you will feel better. And if you keep trying different things that release your creativity, you will maybe fall into it, stumble onto it, but you will ignite your passion. And when that happens and your hair lights on fire because you're doing what you absolutely love and you lose track of time, you forget to eat, it's amazing. Find your purpose, live your purpose, and that's self-care.
Well, there you go. I mean, if you feel that good after you've declared something, said something profound and significant to influence others, you've done a little bit of self-care because you at least had the 2 minutes there of proclaiming something important and valuable to you. And what I heard you say in that is, I don't care if other people agree or disagree. I know the truth to me. That is self-care, acknowledging how you feel about something and accepting that others may see things different and calming yourself in that. And that, even though it's not calm, like chill calm, it's a calming because it's a contentness. That's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. So you get to see it in versatile ways, in different variety of people, in cool ideas. You see that it's a challenge, that it's a growth, and it's a lifelong journey as we're learning how to apply and understand and use self-care. But at the end of the day, we want you to know that self-care is important because we care about you and yourself, and you need to care for yourself as well. So come and join us. We'll learn some more tips, tricks, ideas as we explore through this. Comment with your questions, thoughts, feedback below, and join us for the Successful Survivors podcast next week.